I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking all about sleep. And this is not an episode that you need to press snooze or pause on. It is one to really listen to because sleep is the cornerstone of optimal fertility. It is essential to work on your sleep. So if you are having a hard time falling asleep, if you wake up during the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep, if in the morning you feel tired and wired, if you have insomnia, if you're taking sleep aids, all of this is key to optimize your sleep. And when we do that, we can then optimize our fertility. Excited for you to listen to today's episode. Let's go. Okay, today we are going to talk all about sleep. And yeah, we don't want you falling asleep during this topic because it's super important. And and it may sound like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, let's focus on sleep. Yeah, we all know that. But easier said than done. And I speak to so many people that are telling me, you know what, they've got disrupted sleep. They wake up in the middle of the night. They wake up in the morning and they're tired and wired and they're dragging their butt through the day. And then they may have been prescribed sleeping aids, which they've been on for years. Speak to people like taking sleep aids like benzos and lorazepam, and is it lorazepam? Yeah, like being on that for like 10 plus years, afraid to getting off. And then, and some people don't even want to talk about it. It's like, oh, don't talk about that because I'm trying to get the sleep back. And I'm worried that if I talk about it, I'll jinx it. And then I won't be able to sleep ever again. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff going on right now with sleep. And it's like the sleep aid business, I don't know what that is, like $1 trillion business of so many people kind of get hooked on these things and can't function. And then all the energy drinks and all the rest of the stuff we do to keep ourselves propped up. And it's this vicious cycle. And when you're on the fertility journey, working on your sleep is key. We work on it for, with couples for months. It can be triggering because people are like, if they're used to going to bed at, 2 a.m. and we're like, let's try to get back to 10. And then there's all kinds of reasons why we're a night owl and all sorts of other things. And once we start to, look at the biochemical things, we can start to regulate your sleep. So I'm excited to have Katie today to chat about this topic. And so let's first of all, let's talk about, so why is sleep so important for someone who is trying to conceive?
Yeah, a really good starting place, Sarah. And I think that there are just so many reasons, right? Like one is that if you're listening to this and you have poor sleep, you don't need us to tell you that leads to a poor lived experience, right? And that is regardless of whether you're trying to conceive, not trying to conceive. It is cruddy when you're not getting enough sleep. And we know that, like, from research, that even like losing out on small amounts of sleep can have like massive impacts on both long-term health, but even like our health the next day, right? So like for example, our like lots of our sex hormones are produced overnight while we sleep, and particularly men, like testosterone is produced during those deep sleep hours, right? So if you're not getting that, guess what? Like, your body's not going to be producing the hormones as it would like to. And also, even, when again thinking about those more immediate effects of what happens when we're not sleeping right, is if we have, like, again, just one bad night's sleep, one disruptive night's sleep, and we know that there's many different ways that can present, but one bad night's sleep, whatever that looks like, the next day, again, we're thinking about hormones, but not the sex hormones, but our appetite hormones. So our satiety and our hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, they are basically reversed from one bad night's sleep. And so that has a direct then impact on our health decision making the next day, because we're gonna like probably feel hungrier, or we're gonna feel less in tune to our bodies. We're gonna be more likely to reach for those stimulating foods like sugary foods to keep us going. So there's the longer term effects in terms of like the health concerns and cardiometabolic disease and risk factors for diabetes and long-term impacts for hormone production and pregnancies and everything else. But then there's also just like what we do the next day is impacted by how we slept the night before.
Yeah, like we talked, so like weakened immune system, cognitive issues, like that daytime drowsiness, reduced mental alertness, poor eye coordination, hand-eye coordination, poor concentration and focus, those micro sleeps. I remember my dad, like we were when we travel, and actually I remember we were in England in the tube, and he always could like literally fall asleep like immediately. Which if you're falling asleep immediately, that's to me is a sign of like pure exhaustion. If you hit your head hits the pillow and you are gone, because it should be 5 to 10 minutes of you kind of going to sleep, not just immediately. And he actually, I remember on the tube in London, he was holding 2 bags of groceries, and I guess kind of had his arm must have been around the rail. He fell asleep standing up. I look over, I'm like, he's out. I'm like, what is going on? And my dad has like snoring and sleepwalking and running
Yeah.
through the closets. Like he was literally like walking downstairs. My mom would be like, Alan, come back to bed. He'd be walking, all this stuff. So disrupted sleep for him for sure. And which those micro sleeps, insulin resistance. We say this where if you have a poor sleep that impacts your blood sugar the entire next day. We see a theme with people on the fertility journey with insulin resistance and blood sugar issues, that lower immunity. So a lot of things, I think we all kind of intuitively know this, that poor sleep is not great for our health, but it's important. It's hard when because we all want to sleep. We want to go to close our eyes, go to bed, and that's it. Not like, count sheep and do all sorts of stuff. So, and so to me, if you've got a sleep issue, there's usually other health issues going on as well. And now
Mm.
you're on the fertility journey. Maybe you've got low AMH or high FSH, premature ovarian insufficiency, diminished ovarian reserve, and then you're being pushed to an aggressive IVF, or you better hurry towards IVF. Your eggs are too old, you're too old, the whole thing. But then you haven't optimized your sleep. You're missing like a huge healing opportunity that can help you get pregnant naturally, or when you do go to IVF, like improving the chances of it actually working.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's not forget, when we're thinking about the health of our eggs as well, that melatonin is our sleep hormone. It is our deep sleep hormone. And I know that lots of people go, pop in melatonin pills like that. That's not necessarily the solution here. Like, let's optimize your actual sleep so that your body is actually producing real body melatonin. And the reason that that is important for our egg health is because it is a powerful antioxidant that works, like the pathways work specifically on the health of our eggs. And so if the POI, POF, if the egg health piece of the puzzle is really pertinent for you, then, please, this is a really important episode for you.
Absolutely. And many times people with the melatonin and many of the popular fertility books, it's like, let pound down the melatonin and many of those books can help with IVF. And so many times we see when we do a stool test, the melatonin can actually, when we do a dried urine test for your hormones, we can see the melatonin off the chart. And so then, supplementing can be good, but not always. And DIY piece can kind of get yourself into trouble. So let's talk about if someone is waking up at like in the middle of the night. What do we see there as a reason?
Yeah, there are two main reasons that I see for this. And the first is what we call HPA axis dysfunction. And we've spoken about this, Sarah, on a separate podcast when we were talking about the adrenals. But the reason for that is because our adrenal glands that sit on our kidneys, they operate on an axis with the hypothalamus and pituitary glands in the brain, and they produce cortisol, and cortisol is essentially the hormone that is linked to stress, but it is also linked to our sleep wake cycles and our circadian rhythm. Okay. And so our cortisol, if we've got a really great circadian rhythm and our cortisol is working for us rather than against us, then our adrenals will naturally give us a burst of cortisol on rising, and that helps to give us our get up and go for the day. So on a graph, we see it like going up on a big steep curve first thing in the morning and then dropping right back down again. And then by the mid-afternoon, we want it to be really low. And by the evening, we want it to be basically not there. And if we were to chart melatonin in the same way, it would kind of, it would be slightly of the opposite. So melatonin would be very low when we wake up, so we're not like feeling too sleepy when we wake up, and then it would like gradually kind of, as the evening progresses, we'd start to see it increase, and then it would stay high during the night and then go back down again in the early hours. So this circadian rhythm is very much impacted by, if we do have, like, for whatever reason our stress levels are up here, then that cortisol is cortisol. The adrenals are still producing cortisol, and they don't know the difference between, oh well, is this the cortisol that's helping me wake up in the morning, or is it the cortisol that's theoretically making me run away from a bear, because that's what our bodies think it is, right? And so it's we don't know the difference between those two things. And if there's dysregulation with the mental and emotional stress and all of that, then it's going to have a knock-on effect for the sleep.
Yeah, and definitely check out the podcast Katie and I did on adrenal insufficiency or dysfunction. Definitely check that one out. We'll link it in the show notes. And so some of the things that suppress melatonin, blue and green light. We see this, years. I've sponsored my podcast, Blue Blocks, which are now called Bond Charge, and blue and green light blocking glasses, which can help with your melatonin production. So at sunset, you put them on, and there's sort of like a campfire effect. They have a red lens, and it's like when you have those red lights in your room and things like that. So you don't want to have that harsh, LED light or harsh lights, and your body still thinks it's, time to party and not go to sleep. Sometimes you get that second wind. So it's important to protect yourself from that blue and green light from your tablet, from your phone. Try to put your devices on night mode, and then keep the lights dim. It's interesting how, like, sometimes we intuitively, like for years, I intuitively knew at nighttime, like, dim the lights. I like it really low. I don't want to have some bright light. My husband put the big light on. I'm like, what are you doing? I want to dim. Turns out that was what we needed. It was good. And so sometimes, yeah, he would get that. It's sleepy, and then 11 or 12 you're still up because you got the blue and green light coming in from the television, and you get that second wind. Anything you wanted to say there?
Yeah, it's really just worth remembering here that our bodies are still living literally in the dark ages. We our bodies are evolved in the landscape of, like, we woke up when the sun came up and we went to sleep when the sun went down, because that was our only option before electricity, before we harnessed electricity. And so we that was essentially how we are designed. And if we think to what our lives look like now, it is very, very different to that, and in terms of light exposure, and not just lights that we have on the lighting for the room, but specifically screens. We live in front of screens. We live, eat, breathe screens these days in the modern world. And so and the light from the screens emits blue light, and it is the blue light that is stimulating for our brains, because our brains are telling us, hey, it's daytime, we need to be awake. Whereas actually in the evenings, what we really need is for that blue light to be going down, and that could be either getting stricter about your accessing screens in the evening. It could be about wearing blue light blocking glasses. It could be switching up your Netflix for a book, taking the TV out of the bedroom, those kind of things. But also, things like, we get that modern life often does mean screen time, and that's just how it is. But, even on our phones, there are settings on your phones where you can get the red screen in the evenings. And so in the evening, it's literally as simple as clicking 3 buttons on the side of my phone and my red screen comes on. And then I know that I'm not getting the blue light from that phone in the evening. So really important to just try and work with our body's natural rhythms in that respect.
Exactly. And then sleep apnea. So it's interesting. So 25 to 35% of people with hypothyroidism, and we see like hypothyroidism, subclinical thyroid issues, and Hashimoto's is like across the board with people that we work with. So people being
Mm.
told their TSH is normal, no one looking at a full panel. So really important to optimize your thyroid. And so it's interesting, 25 to 35% of people with hypothyroidism also have sleep apnea, and that sleep apnea is a risk factor for Hashi. So it becomes even, yeah, the autoimmune issue. We think, sleep apnea, maybe we think of an overweight person. Maybe we think of a male that, has sleep apnea that's overweight, but that's not the case. People that are slimmer and are female can have sleep apnea. Anything you wanted to say there?
Yeah, absolutely right. And many people can have sleep apnea and never know it. And so it's often, if you have daytime sleepiness, or if you wake up feeling like really super groggy and not refreshed, then it doesn't mean that you've got sleep apnea, but it's certainly something worth troubleshooting on. And if you share a bed with someone, the easiest way to do is like say, look, you ask them, like, do I ever, and it's not quite the same as snoring. It's linked to snoring. Like if you're a snorer, you're more likely to suffer with sleep apnea. But if you, it's essentially, it's when we stop breathing in our sleep because the airways are blocked, right? And so it's you will stop breathing. So what it would sound like to someone who is in the bed with you is that you'd be kind of struggling for breath, and there may be some snoring involved in that. And then there would be a time where you're just completely silent because you're actually not breathing at that time. And then all of a sudden it would be like, it would be like a sharp intake of breath then, as the airway kind of forces itself open. And you can imagine, like, that's not a healthy state for the body to be in, and the body isn't really resting during that point because it's in emergency mode because it doesn't know whether it's going to be breathing or not, right? So you might be technically asleep and not aware of this, but your body is definitely aware of it, and it's going to have knock-on effects for your sleep quality.
I did a whole episode on sleep apnea with Dr. Mark Berhenna, who is a holistic dentist, and his wife had it. She's like petite and a woman, obviously, and then she discovered she had it. So and also in that episode, and since then I recommend the app Snore Lab. We'll have that in the show notes too. And basically, you can use that app at night and put it on, and you can hear the next day. What does your snoring sound like? You and your partner together there and little chainsaws, or maybe there's nothing, or you can hear what's happening. And then the next steps are to do a sleep study if that still is. Or you can also, before the sleep study, there's mouth tape, which sounds kind of barbaric, but basically there's a mouth tape you just put on your mouth, and it helps you to breathe out of your nose unless you have sinus issues. But really, you want to make sure, that kind of thing can really be harmful for your cardiovascular health and a whole host of other things. So definitely look at that episode. We kind of go into more detail. Okay, so
devices as well. Over here, there's a device that I recommend for people sometimes, and it's a device that you put into your mouth, and it's designed to train your esophagus essentially, and it kind of tones those tubes, like from everything from your neck muscles, and it's like a workout. You put it into your mouth and you create a suction, and you just kind of pull it outwards, and it kind of draws everything up by suction, and you kind of do it a few times like that, and it helps to tone up all those muscles.
well, maybe we can get a link for that too. I'll have that out in the show notes. Another one too are these little I don't know the name of them, but there's like it's a thing that dissolves. You put in your mouth, kind of sometimes it tastes like strawberry or banana, and you put it on the roof of your mouth, and then you keep your tongue up there. Your tongue is kept up on the roof of the mouth, and then that trains your tongue not to like flap around. And so it's almost like you're doing like exercises kind of for that area, and you keep it up there for 30 minutes or so until it dissolves. And then that can help too. And even even that gua sha thing to help on I'm dealing with some of the snoring too, so I feel like I've done all this stuff. But it's like where you can kind of because we're like hunched over like this, and the gua sha can help with the release, the fascia, and all that kind of stuff around the face too. Anything you want to say about those?
I completely agree. You know, if we're essentially what we're thinking about is like it's a muscle tone issue, and I think there's so much today again about our modern lives where loads of us are just like sitting at a desk for the majority of the day, and of course that is going to impact our musculature, and again in terms of the tongue and the mouth breathing, those all impact those internal muscles and can like increase the likelihood. So any of the above or a combination of can be helpful to use to just help to tone everything up and reduce the impact of the snoring and the sleep apnea.
Yeah, I go to the chiro too, and she does the one. She's like, "Okay, time to do your jaw." She gets the glove and sticks her finger in there, and like reefs away on my jaw thing. And then she's like, "Let's do your tongue." I'm like, "Oh my god, this is it's like worse than the neck thing." Although the neck thing is fine, doesn't bother me. Or when she kind of is adjusting me, but that one, I'm like, "Oh, the jaw is like so stiff," and then the tongue, I'm like, "Ow." Hurts. So she tortures me, but we have like a good laugh. But anyway, things to do, right? Sometimes it can get overwhelming. I'm like, oh my god, how many lists of these things do I have to do on a regular basis? Pick one, and again, go from there.
Yeah.
How does a leaky gut then impact our sleep? We see this a lot where people either you were on long-term hormonal birth control, maybe you're dealing with chronic stress from stress of life or stress of the fertility journey, antibiotic use, all this can predispose you to a leaky gut, which then your body mounts an immune response to your favorite foods, kind of lets in the little critters as far as little infections. And then how does that impact our sleep?
And this is one that's really interesting, Sarah, I think, because if we think about some of that you mentioned earlier around the like the dried urine hormone testing, and if we look at some of the pictures that we see there, sometimes if we do look at those lab results, and that image that I gave you earlier of a graph of what your cortisol levels should look like during a day, one that we see like a lot of the time if we are looking at those is like the curve might look pretty all right at the start. They get their cortisol rise at the start of the day, it drops down by the afternoon, it's dropping down, but then in the evening you suddenly see, oop, the cortisol just suddenly, like, it doesn't go crazy, but it's meant to go down, but it goes up instead. And there are lots and lots of reasons for that, but one of the potential reasons for that is dysbiosis in the gut. And the reason for that is because those little critters, as you so kindly call them, they wake up at night. They're nocturnal, right? And so that just as you're getting ready to wind down, they're winding up. And this is a pattern that we often see. And so if we do have that pattern, if someone does have that kind of relative increase in cortisol at the night time, yes, there are lots of reasons why it might be, but we want to explore those. But the dysbiosis, as we call it, in the gut, an imbalance of microbes in the gut, is one of them for sure.
And then anxiety. So this impacting your neurotransmitters. How does that help? I guess obviously when you do have dysregulated sleep, that in itself can lead to like worrisome thoughts. If you're catastrophizing that the next sleep is going to be, you'll be dealing with insomnia, you'll be up all night, or just you won't be able to get rested sleep, and then not even being able to talk about that because you're like don't want to jinx it to give yourself a poor sleep, which can then so it's sort of that chicken and the egg thing you
Yeah.
want to share there.
Yeah, exactly. And so, if you imagine if you're dealing with anxiety, some of the things that are being released into some of the chemical messengers that are being released into your body on a regular basis are around like it's like you're getting constant waves of adrenaline, because as soon as you kind of have those worrying or those triggering thoughts or feelings, they stay with you, right? And then if you've got then a double whammy of like certain genetic predispositions, then once you release some of those like adrenaline chemicals, if you've got like a COMT gene, for example, then they're going to take a lot longer to actually clear out of your system. So once they're there for a longer period of time. And we've mentioned the cortisol as well. all of those things can inhibit the production of like some of the more relaxing neurotransmitters like GABA. GABA is a primary neurotransmitter that is like associated, if we think about the nervous system, and we think about the sympathetic nervous system, which is very much this kind of fight or flight response, versus the parasympathetic, which is very much the calming influence. Then it's if we're in one, it's going to be very difficult to activate the other. And so, and let's face it, the majority of us in the modern world are probably sitting a bit too much in this one, in the sympathetic, and then not spending enough time in the parasympathetic, and really kind of in that calming mode. Really the more time that we can start to be spending in that calming mode, if we do have that high anxiety predisposition. So, this is coming back to this, not rocket science, it's your classic things, it's your meditations, it's your breath work, it's your just like coming into the moment, your mindfulness, anything that you can do to just calm down and like remind your body and yourself that you're safe and that things are safe. The more time we can spend in that space, the more likely that the production of GABA and our nice sleepy neurotransmitters are going to work properly for us when it's time to sleep.
Yeah, I found a cool breathwork app too. It's called Othership, and they'll run you through a few free like 2 to 3 minute ones, and breathwork's different than meditation. So it's like in out in out in out. You can always get that tingling in your fingers, your extremities, and it's like almost like some sort of like a high or a euphoria from doing it. I've done it for like half an hour, and then you're like crying. It's a whole thing, just releasing all this stuff out of your body. So that one is Othership, which has got some cool guided breath work to check out. Environmental triggers, anything you want to share with us on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just a nod to say that two sides to this, I guess. The first is that a lot of the time when we're thinking about environmental triggers, we're thinking about things that can be driving inflammation. So we might be thinking about like chemical triggers, or a big one that people are exposed to in the bedroom is mold as well. Like, I mean, I worked with a client recently who she was going through all sorts of stuff. She'd had like loads of failed rounds of IVF. She's got long-term gut issues. She's got this, that, and the other. And it was only in like our third session or something. She's like, oh yeah, like I sleep next to mold in my bed like every night and have done for years. I'm like, oh wow, okay, like that's not cool. And so environmental triggers in that respect can be problematic, because again it's coming back to this theory of stress, right? And there is mental emotional stress, and then there's stressors on the body. And so some of those environmental triggers can be stressors on the body, but also when we're thinking about environmental triggers, environmental aspects to sleep, we're actually thinking like about creating a sleep environment that is conducive to sleep. And so it's coming back to these principles of like being in a really dark room, making sure like if you have really thin curtains and you sleep next to a bright street lamp that's outside your window, like that's not conducive to sleep, because again your meditate it's your brain is going to be still wired even while you think you're sleeping. So we need to make sure that the room is as dark as possible overnight, and then ideally conversely to that, we need to be making sure that we get some really bright natural sunlight as early in the day as possible. So as soon as we wake up, that's when we want to be exposing our body to natural light. So throwing open the curtains, throwing open the window even, and helping get our body that get up and go for the day. But also like the temperature matters as well, right? So keeping the room cool. I know lots of us like to be really nice and warm and cozy, but it's better to cozy yourself up with blankets and those kind of things, but the room temperature itself to be on the cooler side.
Yeah, the last house I was in, there was like a window that was open for the people that were there before us, and I guess it had leaked, and then it was a newer house too, but the mold had got in there, and my husband took the whole thing apart, and he wore a mask, but all the thing about I think those mold spores just went all through the bedroom, and literally, and then we did our room faced a street light, and so we had the blinds, but there was always light coming in, and then I finally discovered after years a sleep mask, which I'm like, wow, that was a game changer. And it's funny with that throwing open the curtains because I'm like, I literally love in the morning we have curtains at this new house. I like rip them open like this, and we face a field, and I'm like, hello. So yeah, it's like a crazy thing. I'm like, give me the the light. My husband is like, yeah, he doesn't really care about open the windows or the curtains. He like keep it dark, but I'm like, I like to bring the light in. Turns out that's good. Okay, so alcohol, I think we know how alcohol can disrupt our sleep. When you're on the fertility journey, minimizing or eliminating alcohol as much as possible is key. And if you're the kind of person that you come home from, we've done many episodes on alcohol, so definitely check that out. If you come home from work and you're like, I need a glass of wine or I need a drink to calm down, sort of see what other sort of coping tools you can use besides alcohol and how that can, that can negatively impact your sleep. Anything you want to say on that one?
Yeah, two things there, Sarah. I think firstly, in response to what you just said there, of like that I need a glass of wine after work, or I need a glass of wine at insert whatever point here. I think that there's really something there around ceremony and like closing down the day, and so a lot of the time, we do need to, if we've had a really stressful day at work, like we do need to mark that with something, and it's worth marking that with something because we're transitioning from one mode to like, okay, well, we're winding down now. And so if you are trying to replace or substitute alcohol with something, it might not work for you to say, oh, well, I'm just going to cut out alcohol and that's it. Like, let's see, like, how are you using alcohol at the moment? And if it is to kind of help close down the day and to wind down, like, what little ceremony can you gift yourself with every day that does help you with that transition, that doesn't involve alcohol, rather than just ignoring that need? What can you put in place of it that's maybe a bit healthier, and helps you to kind of mark that wind down period? And then the second is, the obvious, as you say. I mean, we all know this, but it's just a reminder, is that a lot of people think that alcohol helps them sleep. Because it can send you into a bit of a stupor, but actually, all of the research tells us that an alcohol induced sleep is not a restful sleep. It's not a restorative sleep. You might be out of it, but your body again is still struggling, because ultimately it's a toxin and your body is having to do a whole lot of processing to try and get that out of your system.
Back to the ceremony, I was marking, so I'll do later calls with people, and I'll mark the end of the day with a bowl of chips. So like I'm working to eliminate that. I'm like, nope, that's not good. To like, let's watch Love Is Blind and then have a bowl of chips. Okay, so caffeine. Yeah, so the half-life of caffeine is 6 to 8 hours. So that means if you drink coffee at 1 p.m., half the caffeine may still be present at 9. I know, like, I don't drink a lot of caffeine, and if I do, I had some coffee the other day. It was like a decaf coconut latte, and I was like, damn, that's good. I have felt actually insane. Like, I was with my son, and I felt like so high, and I get super planny, and all these things I'm going to do. And then it's like a little crash. And then I'm like, God, I'm cranky. But yeah, like I hadn't had caffeine in maybe like 6 months or so. And I'm like, wow, because we all have these genetic SNPs that we don't maybe process it as well as other. So to really see, interesting to take it out and then see how you can, how well you tolerate it. And is that impacting your sleep? Sometimes we get addicted to that caffeine and we're having it too late in the day, or maybe it's not working for us anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a huge amount of individual variability when it comes to tolerance to caffeine. My husband is and his family are like you, Sarah. Like my mother-in-law, she's like, if I have a cup of coffee, like the caffeine affects me so much, I get rage. Like I just get rage because I'm so I'm so overstimulated. And my husband, like his sleep would definitely be impacted by coffee as well. Like my side of the family are like really slow metabolizers for caffeine, so it doesn't really have the same impact on us. And so there is individual variability, but I do think that a lot of us do become like desensitized as well. So a lot of the time, if you're having 6 cups of coffee a day, including in the afternoon, and that's kind of just to help get you through a regular day, chances are you've got a caffeine addiction, because it is an addictive substance. And so it's my advice on caffeine is quite it's down to the individual, but if you are having 6 cups of coffee a day, then that is definitely too much. So please do work on that and prioritize the afternoon being caffeine free if possible.
Yeah, even tea. When I had like a London fog from Starbucks, which not the best, but what are you gonna do? And it was like a venti, and then they put in like 2 tea bags that were like I didn't realize they were in there. They were steaming, and then I had it, and I was like, oh God, get rid of those. Now if I have it, and it's not the best because it's got sugar and stuff in there, but what are you gonna do? But I'll be like, steep that for 1 minute, because I had it, and I was talking to my husband. He's like, what is up with you? You're like,
Okay.
I start like planning like vacations. I'm like, okay, we're taking all these vacations. I was like a maniac. Anyways, okay, magnesium deficiency. We see this a lot. 85% of us are deficient in magnesium. So that's one of our foundational supplements. You can do magnesium drinks before bed. A lot of things to help with magnesium. Anything you want to say there?
Yeah. I mean, magnesium has got so many functions in the body, over 300, and it's ultimately it's relaxing, right? And so if we're thinking about like anything to do with like magnesium deficiency, we're thinking like if anyone's got that like tightness in their body, if anyone's, because it's to do with our muscles relaxing as well. So if people have that, or if people have like twitching, any kind of twitching, we're often thinking about magnesium. Also anxiety, we're thinking about magnesium, and sleep too. And so a really nice good quality magnesium can really actually make a difference for people's sleep.
Yeah, I used to have like the feet cramps, the like the foot cramps, um
Leg, that
the
sort of
leg
thing.
cramp, the eyeball was twitching like crazy. And I'm like, okay. And it was to a point, like for years I was fine. And all of a sudden I started getting all that. And I'm like, oh, okay, magnesium. I didn't know it at the time. And then I figured out magnesium later on. Okay, so blood sugar too, where your blood sugar can go on that roller coaster, and then you're waking up in the middle of the night. Maybe it's a blood sugar imbalance, could be gut infections too. But how do we, maybe a little snack before bed if you're dealing with that, to like a fat bomb or something like that to help with blood sugar? Anything you want to say there?
Yeah, absolutely. Like that is a good point. Blood sugar honestly is like one of the biggest reasons that I see for sleep issues, and it's one that is like possibly one of the biggest, the most overlooked as well. Like we often think about, especially for women in their 40s, people are like, is it the perimenopause and like this kind of thing, and they go straight to the hormone imbalances, blood sugar imbalances. I mean, we're still thinking about hormone imbalances because insulin is a hormone, but it's really really critical to look at. And yes, like as a kind of a bit of a plaster on the wound approach, a healthy snack before bed can help to kind of balance those blood sugars overnight. But ultimately, if you've got blood sugar imbalances, you need to start at the other side of the day. You need to start with breakfast. You need to start with what you're actually breaking your fast with in the morning, because what you do first thing in the morning, that sets the precedent for the rest of the day. So if you're eating like a high carbohydrate based breakfast in the morning, and your blood sugars go up here, then you are going to spend the rest of the day with your blood sugars roller coastering all around the place. And even, you can have the healthiest snack as you like before bed, and ultimately it's not going to solve the problem. So we need to work on what's actually happening, not just at breakfast, in the rest of the day as well. But breakfast is the most important meal of the day when it comes to the blood sugar balance piece of the equation.
Yeah, when you do that fats and protein together, it just really like keeps you satiated, and yeah, you're not having those cravings. Anything on the hormone balance? Anything you want to share there?
Yeah, I mean, again, the one of the hormonal imbalances that can lead to sleep deprivation that I think lots of people might be aware of is like a depletion of estrogen, and estrogen. There are there are estrogen receptors in every single cell of our body. Estrogen is not just a hormone that's linked to our menstrual cycles and our eggs. And so, yes, like if that is imbalanced, then you might see sleep issues. And they correspond to things like serotonin and like those kind of happy hormones, and then the relaxing hormones, the melatonin. They're all related. They all speak to one another. And so estrogen, yeah, so serotonin can be regulated by estrogen in the brain, and then that in turn is like used to make melatonin. And so it's never it's never as simple as just kind of like, oh well, bung some HRT in there, or bung some hormone replacement in. It's okay, let's look at the wider picture here and figure out what's actually going on for you, and address those.
And magnesium, so that can also help with restless legs syndrome, which I had a friend for years. She had restless leg syndrome. The leg was flying all over. I was like, what is up with that? And it turns out it is a syndrome. And then she found out years later she had celiac. So that's an interesting correlation there. Vitamin D, we see this low. We see it low in the single digits in the teens. You want it between 60 to 80. We've done an episode, Kay and I, on vitamin D. Definitely go check that out. We go into deep dive about that. Vitamin D can really help your sleep quality, reduces, it raises your sleep duration. Anything you wanted to say there?
Yeah, again, like we know so much more now about vitamin D than we ever did, and its links to neurotransmitters and brain health, and its links to the immune system and inflammation and hormone production and everything else. Like it's linked to so many factors in the body. So there are so many ways in which vitamin D is important for you if you are on a fertility journey, and sleep is a part of that picture for sure.
And vitamin B6, which a lot of times can be used in the first parts of pregnancy there. If you're feeling nauseous, that can be really helpful. How does it help with sleep?
Yeah, so vitamin B6 is like, again, it's part of this cluster of B6 and B vitamins and hormone production are very much linked within the body. And so when we're thinking about hormones, we are often thinking about the B vitamins. B6 is like really important for some of those calming hormones. So like progesterone production, we need vitamin B6. And like coming back to that GABA piece of the puzzle that we spoke about earlier, that neurotransmitter GABA, and vitamin B6 is important for all of those, and then thinking again about that serotonin and the melatonin production. So B6, whereas a lot of the other B vitamins are quite excitatory in nature, so we would never recommend taking most of the B vitamins later in the day because they might like be a bit too zingy. Vitamin B6 is the opposite. It's very, very calming, and yeah, it's been linked to helping with insomnia and also with like mood disorders too.
Yeah, and you want to have an anti-inflammatory diet. Definitely check out the episode I did on the elimination diet and sort of which diet is right for fertility. And the name of the episode is which diet is right for fertility? Is it paleo? Is it carnivore? Is it keto? Is it vegan? It's none of the above. It's the elimination diet, which is the gold standard. So start that. Take out the processed foods. Go switch to organic. Let's do the final word here on melatonin. What's the take on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think just we kind of alluded to this earlier, Sarah, already around if you melatonin is kind of deemed this like super supplement sometimes, and not so much here in the UK because you can't get it as easily. But I think over your side of the pond is people are popping melatonin like there's no tomorrow. And actually, like if your actual issue is low melatonin, maybe it might help. But like there are so many ways that we can naturally it's a plaster on the wound approach. And if the issue for you isn't melatonin, then it's going to make you feel worse because you're gonna feel like really sleepy and groggy and like overtired, and then that kind of feeds into the whole cycle.
Absolutely. And we've helped many people with poor sleep conceive. So people with low AMH and high FSH, people that are waking, just thinking of this one, she had POI, it was 0.04. She was waking waking up in the middle of the night, trouble falling asleep, didn't feel refreshed upon rising. And she followed our Fab Fertile method and got pregnant naturally. within, I think it was like 5 months. So sleep was part of the equation as well as doing all the testing and, taking that very targeted approach. But bottom line, sleep is key, important when you're on the fertility journey to optimize. Any final thoughts, Katie?
Yeah, exactly that. Like it's not something to be overlooked. Like if it's sleep is one of those things where a lot of us think, oh well, I'll come to that later, or I'll sleep when I die. And it's like, no, actually, this is a priority for you. Like the nutrition, really important. The sleep, equally important. The stress, equally important. These are all like the critical pieces of the puzzle.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you.
You're so welcome.